Welcome to the Asia Advantage with Dezan Shira and Associates, featuring business commentary and regulatory news on emerging Asia. Today on the podcast, we're in Beijing talking about comparisons between China and India. With us is Devonshire-Ellis, founding partner of Dezan Shira and Associates. Dezan Shira and Associates is a business advisory, tax, payroll, and accounting firm that specializes in the Asian region. Welcome to the podcast. What was it like setting up a business in China in 1992?
Well, China in 1992 was very different from China today. First of all, perhaps I can just describe the differences between 1992 and 2012. In 1992, the average age of a Chinese worker was 23, and in 2012, that average age of a Chinese worker is 37. So there are differences in what that guy needs. 20 years ago, he didn't have very much money, and frankly wasn't earning very much. He would, at 23, be more interested in chasing girls and drinking beers and smoking cigarettes. Today, at 37, that guy's got responsibilities. He's married, he's got a child, he's got a mortgage. He probably has two sets of dependents, his own parents and his wife's parents, and he needs to earn money. So over the last 20 years, what we've seen is China develop a middle class of about 200 to 250 million, whereas in 20 years that demographic did not exist. So there's a great change in how China looks today, 20 years on, that it did in 1992. And I think the most fundamental change has been that population demographic and the age of a population, and that has significant implications for what we're going to do with China or how the world perceives it. Not least the fact that Chinese nationals, that middle class population, can now afford to buy products and goods and services from overseas. So huge differences. But of course, the thing that most people will refer to are the infrastructure differences. 20 years ago, there wasn't a main road between Shenzhen and Guangzhou. 20 years ago, there wasn't a Pudong International Airport, and 20 years ago, there wasn't an airport road of sorts leading to Capital Airport in Beijing. All these things have happened in big time, and of course, the infrastructure development in China has been really the most remarkable form of development that I've seen during this time, and that's happened not just in the principal cities, but also in the second tier and more remote cities right across China. So huge differences.
How is India in 2012 similar to China in 1992?
Yeah, interestingly, the average age of an Indian worker today in 2012 is the same age as a Chinese worker was in 1992. The average age, 23. So this means that India is now going to have that demographic, that population dividend is now beginning in India, and that cheap manufacturing and that export manufacturing boom that China has been able to ride over the last 20 years, that is now shifting to India and ASEAN. The average age of a worker in ASEAN is 24. So they're very different, but India 2012 is about to start on the same journey, demographic journey that China did 20 years ago, and you'll start to see the Indian market and its destination for foreign direct investment improve significantly as a result of this demographic drive.
What accounts for the differences in the economies of China and India for the past 20 years? Is it government, population, or something else entirely?
Well, I talked about the demographic dividend, that massive labour force that both China and now India have, and that can supply the world with low-cost manufactured goods. So that is a demographic similarity between both China and India that's real, and it has, of course, because of that, there are political implications which are government-led. China, over the last 20 years, has done a very good job of not just getting that young workforce into work and being productive, but also very wisely reinvesting the wealth, the initial wealth that gave them, back into the Chinese society in terms of education, improving infrastructure, and so on and so forth, and have led the Chinese population to a situation whereby the economic wealth of China is both sustainable and increasing. So that's great for China. India is just really 20 years behind, and that same driver in terms of both wealth creation, putting people to work, that young labour demographic, that is exactly what's happening to India right now. So they'll both go through the same phenomena, which incidentally has an economic theory attached to it. Arthur Lewis, the American economist, devised a theory in 1954 called the Lewisian turning point, which both China and now India are starting to achieve. That is the increased wealth within their populations, and then ultimately a sustainable economic and increasingly wealthy population. That is where China is now, and that is where India is going. So China is ahead, but India, in terms of its demographic dividend, will also catch up.
It can be said that the Chinese economy of 20 or 30 years ago had nowhere to go but up. Is it possible that people are overestimating the future growth of the Indian economy?
Again, I don't believe there's overestimating of that, but it will be different. The population dividend, that is real, that is there, and you can't get rid of that. So India is going to benefit from that just in the same way that China did. That's a given. The differences are that China, as a one-party state, was pretty much able to very much focus on exactly what it wanted to do, although often that came at the expense of social health. Whereas India is a democracy, and these things do get discussed, often at some length, before the government is able to make a decision. On balance, having viewed both countries and how they operate, I wouldn't actually make too much of a difference between India as a democracy and China as a one-party state, because I think that the decision-making process, although it seems to be perhaps more administrative in India, actually is about the same sort of, takes the same sort of time frame. I'll give you an example. Although China, of course, tends to get its laws and a statute without much debate, it does still, often laws still face a delay in terms of China releasing its implementing rules. So although the law is on a statute, it can still take another 12, sometimes 24 months before anyone really knows how China intends to make those rules work. So there are delays in China. In India, we have the same delays, but it's debated much more in the media. It is a democracy, there is free media, so it creates much more intense speculation, and I think that leads to a presumption that perhaps India is more difficult, more administrative. I don't believe that to be the case, actually. So I think that often with a free media where debate is open and is very much taken up in India, it makes the Indian economy overall appear more administrative than it actually is. So no, I don't think that there is an overestimation there, although of course the Indian government do need to get laws onto the statute, they do need to get reform in place, but that is happening. We're expecting tax reform in the next couple of years. That will have the impact of reducing corporate income tax in India from the current 45%, which is far too high, to a much more reasonable 30%. That's expected to happen shortly, and when that does, that's going to be a huge trigger for FDI into India, and at that point then you'll start to see much more interest and foreign direct investment interest in India as opposed to China. So it's really just a matter of being patient.
Thank you for joining us.
Okay, thank you, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks for joining us today. For more Asian business and regulatory news, visit our website at www.asiabriefingmedia.com. We love to hear your comments. Email us at podcast@asiabriefingmedia.com. Follow us on Twitter @AsiaBriefing. Visit our Facebook page. This podcast is produced by Asia Briefing Media for Dezan Shira and Associates. www.dezshira.com. That's DEZSHIRA.com. Thanks for listening.